Hello Game Art students. Today we're going to start looking at our Parkour game project. And the very first building block of everything that we're going to be doing in this project and next ones is the idea of blueprints. So blueprints are basically groups that can have all sorts of game assets in them as well as code. So let's look at how we would get started making a blueprint. This is our blueprint dropdown. When we open it, I'm going to choose right at the beginning here, New Empty Blueprint Class. Now this pop-up lists lots of different types of blueprints, and there are far many more if we open the all classes here. The main one we're going to be using in this project is Actor. Some of these later ones have additional code in them so that they can be controlled and walk around and have jumps and movement speed and all sorts of things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Actor here to make just a generic blueprint. And it's going to ask me where it wants to go. It hopefully makes a blueprints folder for me, and I'm going to give it a name. In this case, for the example, I'm going to go with BP underscore torch. So BP for short, and torch is what I'm going to be making as a useful example. Now when we've created a blueprint, it will now open the separate blueprint editor. So this menu has its own details panel that applies to the things that are in the blueprint. It has its own outliner here called components, which lists all the things in the blueprint. And then it has a bunch of other sections here like variables, where we'll be able to add different numbers and code that we want to save, as well as the event graph, which is where we'll be using scripting to add code. So when we want to add something to the blueprint here, over on the component list, we can see that it has the blueprint itself, and within this default scene root. This is basically the origin of the blueprint, so that all the objects stay in relative reference to each other. I'm going to go to our Add dropdown. I'm going to add the first piece here, a static mesh. So a static mesh is like any of the other meshes we'd put in here, and I can come over here and choose what I want it to be. If you have something selected in your content drawer already, it will actually add as that thing. But I'm going to come over here on the right side, and I'm going to grab a cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and scale it in the window here. I kind of want it to be skinny and tall. I'm going to change my scale settings so I can make it even skinnier, something like that. I'm going to go ahead and add another static mesh here. This one I'm going to make be a sphere. It's going to be a little top ball. Let's scale it down. To put it on top. Now you notice that as I'm scaling stuff, it seems like it's keeping a different scale amount, and that's because it is beneath the previous static mesh, which makes it a child of it, so all these things that I'm doing to it are affected by the static mesh above. So I'm going to drag it so that it's on the default scene root here, and choose attach, so that they're both separately underneath the scene root. Now I can much more easily control the scale. It keeps its own scale and reference. I'm going to turn off some of my snap settings here so I can make it nice and pretty. Looks like a little matchstick. While I'm at it, I'm going to choose some materials here. I'm just going to find wood. I'm going to use this walnut. Again, this is just an example, so as you follow along, you can choose your own as we make our first one here. Okay, I'm also going to add a particle effect. I'm going to use Cascade because I know that's the default that comes with the starter content. So I'm going to grab in here a little fire, which we can see. I'm going to move that up so it's on the ball. And maybe also scale this down a little bit so it fits a little better. So here's my little torch. And finally, I'll add like a little light to it so that it gives off light. I'm going to put it above, Maybe make the color a little orange. Something like that. Okay, now when I am done with a blueprint that I've put together, you can see here we need to compile, which if we had code, it makes sure all the code doesn't have any bugs, but here it's also going to just make sure everything is built correctly, and we're going to save. Now if I look in my blueprints folder, you can see I have this little torch, and I can bring it into the scene, and it has its little fire, and it has the light. We could also add sound effects. We could add all sorts of things to this. The benefit of this is I can add a whole bunch of them all at once. If I go back into the torch and make any changes in here, it will affect every version of them. But this doesn't mean that they always have to be the same. I can choose one that already exists in my level, and looking over here on the right side of my details panel, you can see this little window here is the components section from inside our blueprint. And we can actually click on things in here and make changes to them. So I can change material out for a different one. I can also make edits to things like the timing here on my fire. You can see this one is much faster. You can even change the color of the light. And you can see the original is unchanged and all the previous ones are unchanged. We're going to be using this a lot when we're making moving platforms and rotating platforms for our parkour game, in that we can make a default base of a platform and then make edits to it in the scene by making specific edits to our blueprint.